Frank here, BrinksOne.com. Today is going to be a population-specific video and talk, specifically aimed at law enforcement. Certainly, the information will be maybe of value and of interest to non-law enforcement, people that have, family, friends, whatever in law enforcement, want to pass it on, and people just have an interest. But this is going to be dedicated, like I say, specifically to law enforcement, and the reason for that we'll get into. But what prompted me to do this video actually was a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine named Whitney, deputy, passed away of a heart attack, and very unexpectedly, for sure, because you just couldn't have expected something like that from him, in terms of his exercise, his diet, and all that. So I mean, he didn't, at least on the exterior, of course, have what we would say, were the classic risk factors of being overweight, not exercising, poor diet. So it really came as a really big surprise. Whit and I wrote an article in Police Magazine a while back, not a couple of years ago, which I will post below. A very good article, basically for patrol athletes, which I think anyone, again, who's is a patrol officer or knows such would find that very useful. I'll post that below. But so it just kind of brought up for me, once I kind of got over the shock. I needed a little while to process it, but I thought, well, what could I put out besides just kind of sitting around and, doing the usual, rest in peace routine posting on Facebook or whatever type stuff, which is, personal feel good stuff. But, I like to, I've always tried to get back to law enforcement, and like I say, and military. So we'll get into that. This is not new for me. You'll see in a second that I've actually been doing this for quite some time. And like I say, I've been published in a number of law enforcement publications, and done a lot of seminars for law enforcement and so forth. I've been a little bit not out of that for a time. I moved from the Northeast to Florida and didn't really follow up with it. But this event with him kind of reminded me that maybe it was time to put something out that hopefully would benefit the larger community in law enforcement, certainly with some overlap to military or anything. But I think this one is going to be a little more law enforcement specific, patrol officer, maybe specific, honestly. So, so this is dedicated to Whit. And let's get into this a little bit. So what I'm going to use today is a slideshow that I used in my seminars. You'll see some of it's, again, we'll go through it, but I'm going to use a slideshow that I've used during my seminars to discuss what we're going to talk about as far as risk factors, or controlling risk factors, reducing risk for law enforcement, as far as specific to heart disease. Again, there could be some overlap to other major killers of law enforcement, which is cancer. But I think heart disease is the number one killer for law enforcement by a wide margin to the general population. So again, I think, some people might be watching this either in law enforcement, not in law enforcement, saying, well, sure, we know that heart disease is a major killer of the population, and so what? Well, we know that. Well, it's not just it's the killer. It's the number one or number two killer of the general population. Law enforcement, however, is at much higher risk for that. So what we're going to do is I'll bring in the slides. Let's talk about this. Is the seminar that I used to do, and I'll explain sort of, I'll update it a little bit. And then after that, I want to take a look at just by coincidence, again, PoliceOne just put out a good article on heart disease and it being the number one killer of law enforcement, people in the law enforcement community. And I think that will be of some value too. And there's some resources in there. Again, also understand that my take on the approach for this type of thing may be a little different than what you might, certainly what you're going to read in a typical publication and so forth, which is going to be, I would say, very traditional approach for the most part. But again, just even taking those traditional routes in law enforcement could go a long way. So let me bring in this. Let's bring in this, and it's a little clunky. It's sometimes a little hard for me to pull stuff in. Let's see. So I'm going to add this to the stream. Okay, that worked out great. I'm happy. So let's get into this a little bit. And like I say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll through this because there's parts of this seminar that aren't really that applicable or maybe that useful. So again, don't worry I'm going to stop at the parts I think are of benefit to the population. We say I'm mostly directing this, like you say, towards the rank and file, but you'll understand what I'm talking about. So let me get over here. All right, so let's start with the first slide. This is what I would put up when I'm standing in front of a group of law enforcement. And also, I'd just like to say that, again, if you are with the department and you need a seminar specifics, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. I'm always, like I said, I've always been a ardent supporter of law enforcement and military and first responders in general, of course, those people that are EMTs and firefighters and so forth. So here's the first slide. So Optimal SWAT was a sort of little side company that I had started some years ago. And I had a site called optimalswat.com, which is no longer up, so don't bother going there. What I did was incorporate most of the stuff that I had on that site into my main website, Brink Zone. And below this video, I will again put a link to the section that is dedicated to police, tactical, law enforcement, and military. But anyway, so don't worry about that. But it was sort of a side gig that I had, and I'll explain to you why. So let me let's scroll down a little bit here. Let me bring that guy up. If you don't know me, basic background. Again, at one time, I was an adjunct trainer for Smith & Wesson. I'm not anymore. This is an old slide. These are old slides, but I was an adjunct for them. I designed a couple courses for Smith & Wesson Training Academy that were only open to law enforcement. It was part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was open to general law enforcement rank and file, and part 2 was open only to tactical and or those that had taken part 1. So I've been a writer for various publications. Again, I'll play. I don't, as you says, it says see handouts. Well, there's no handouts. I will post my bio below, but I was a well-known writer for a long list of magazines that you can see, mostly health and fitness and bodybuilding and all that, but law enforcement too. I've been published in peer-reviewed journals. I was a trainer of high-level athletes. Was the performance trainer for Nemlik SWAT team, which is a New England regional team, for a couple of years, getting them ready for competitions and such, and just other groups concerned with optimal performance and health and that type of thing. That's my basic background. So, like I said, if you want more in-depth, my bio, I'll link that below. Just like I say, for those that don't know who I am, maybe they're new to this page, maybe they shared this. Okay, before we continue, that doesn't mean nothing. That was basically to how to find me. This part I'm scrolling to, don't worry about that. This is just what I was when I'd be on stage and I'd say, we don't worry about taking notes, guys. Just pay attention to me. And I had a lot of handouts that I would always give out because I, having taken God knows enough courses, college courses in my life, taking notes can be very time consuming, and I really want people to pay attention. So this is where we get to the good stuff. So, all right. So the beginning of my seminar was what I call nutrition versus Kevlar. And this, of course, when I put that up on the screen, would raise some eyebrows and what the hell is he talking about, looks and all that, which was good. That's what I was shooting for. Okay. So, and my point basically of this slide was, you get up every day and you go to work and, you put on your ballistic vest and your gear and your bat belt and all that stuff, obviously with the intent of coming home in one piece. And that's the goal. But you are by a large margin more likely to die of cardiovascular disease and heart disease. Heart disease is cardiovascular disease. Not all cardiovascular is heart disease. But you are much more likely to die, I believe about 25 times more likely to die from cardiovascular disease, having a heart attack and dying, than you are of getting shot or anything else, getting hit by the number 1 and the number 2 things that, of course, lead to the death of police officers. Used to be getting hit by cars, I recall, and then second was gunshots, and that may have changed over the years. I haven't looked at the recent data, but anyway, regardless, point being that you understand obviously the purpose and the benefits of putting on your bullet-resistant vests and all your gear and all that, and statistically speaking, that's not what's going to take you out. So that was my kind of point to drive home. So law enforcement suffers higher rates of CVD than the U.S. population. Well, why? So here's this to me is the take home of which I've been trying to put forward. There's been some studies where even when you account for what we call the typical confounders as to heart disease, that is when you remove the usual reasons for heart disease, poor diets, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, lack of exercise, all that, law enforcement still has much higher rates of cardiovascular disease. And the reason for that the authors concluded, and probably, is the stress. That's probably why, even when you account for those usual suspects as to, causes of heart disease, that law enforcement has much higher rates. So we have to account for that. And unfortunately, when we talk about stress, chronic stress, there's obviously different types of stress. There's acute stress. You go on a call, you go on a domestic, it's sort of normal. It goes completely haywire. You're in a battle for your life, yada, yada. Well, that's obviously acute stress. Big dump of epinephrine, heart rate, all that goes up. You're all aware of that. Chronic stress is where it's just an underlying consistent stress. That is the more damaging stress. Acute stress actually doesn't appear to be that damaging. And obviously, we've seen all manner of combat veterans from World War II and people that have been through all kinds of awful stuff that was short-lived that, have often gone on to live normal lifespans, if not longer. Chronic consistent stress appears to be really the damaging stress. And so even when you account for the usual suspects with law enforcement, like say poor diets and cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels and blood pressure, there still appears to be a much higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, I don't know, I haven't looked in the data in a while as to whether once you account for those usual suspects, how much greater the risk still is. I don't, there's probably more newer studies. I just haven't looked, but anyway. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We'll talk about that in a minute. So thus, at the end of this, as it says at the end of this, statistically speaking, it's not bullets you have to worry about, but heart disease and others, okay? This next slide, again, not totally 100%. Here, I keep going past the slide. So this next one is not perfectly applicable to who I'm talking to now, which is, again, the rank and file law enforcement community. But it's still there's some applications here. I mean, again, training, overtraining, combat. Let's just say that, chronic stress, but it can lead to immune suppression, loss of lean body mass, increased reaction time, reduced testosterone, reductions in mental acuity, increased oxidative stress, increased susceptibility to heat, cold stress, blast-induced hearing loss. Again, that's not a real common problem, obviously, for patrol athletes, unless you have, gunfire going off next to your head all the time and you're not wearing hearing protection. Inadequate nutritional intake, that, of course, is a big one with rank and file law enforcement. We'll get to that in a minute. Disruption in circadian rhythms. Again, that's these talks, when I gave these talks, were a lot of times, again, given to and towards military personnel, special operations types. But again, with some overlap to tactical law enforcement. But again, disruption in circadian rhythms very much applies to beat cops because, of course, you're doing night shifts. A lot of times your sleep rhythms, your sleep patterns are completely all screwed up. And this has come to show, we used to sort of say this as an offhanded thing. Yeah, that's a bad thing. But in the last, 10 years, maybe 5 years, the disruption in circadian rhythms is actually a really big deal. And there is a lot of data actually finding that that is quite damaging to a number of systems and immunity. And people, like, they find that night shift workers and stuff, for example, have, again, higher rates of cancer and heart disease and other diseases. And even when you adjust again for food and the other usual suspects, it seems to come down again literally to the disruption in their circadian rhythms. So that's a big deal. And there are some ways that you can improve that. Obviously, again, the job is the job, and you can only do so much if that's the shift you're on. But there are definitely things you can do to improve that. And I wouldn't ignore that one. I wouldn't just sort of say, yeah, okay, of course, inadequate sleep or sleeping at the wrong time is a negative. It's actually a lot more than that. So I'm going to do, this is going to be an overview talk. I can't go down the details of every one of these. But again, I'm trying to impress upon you all the larger picture. This one is not real applicable, but again, I'm just going to go through this quickly. This was supplement use patterns of special operations forces. I just think that people should be aware that, some of the more elite teams, the more elite units we have, for example, and this is older research. I think there's newer research since then, but the Naval Health Research Center actually found that about 80% of SEALs polled currently use a variety of supplements. And there was quite a bit of something. I think it was like 4 to 6. Again, I don't have those were in my handouts. There was more data after this. For example, Rangers, or at least people going to Ranger school, use quite a bit of supplements and so forth. And I haven't done, actually, one of the things I wanted to do was to actually perhaps do my own study and poll tactical law enforcement and see what percentage of people on the tactical law enforcement teams used supplements in comparison to the military units. But you know what? This reminds me, that's one more thing on my list of things I'd like to do. But so what did they use? Again, this is just sort of interesting tidbit, and we'll get past this. Sports bars, creatine, multivitamins, fluid electrolyte replacement drinks, protein amino acid formulas. Why did they use it? Hold on. Hopefully I'm bringing these up. Increase muscle mass, strength, and power, provide energy, improve general health, pretty obvious stuff. Now, this I thought was very interesting. And again, there's more information since then. And just FYI, I will also put this under this video. I wrote a paper with a Dr. Hodebeck. Dr. Hodebeck was out of Fort Bragg. He's not there anymore, but he was a medical doctor out of Fort Bragg, and worked with, as you'd expect, Rangers and I assume guys out of CAG and so forth. But I know he worked with pretty much everybody out of the Womack Center, and he and I wrote a paper on supplement use for for the military. I don't really special operations, but so we looked at the studies that were specific to that population. These weren't animal studies, they weren't rat studies, these were studies done specifically in military populations, and looked at what could be a benefit. I'll post that underneath, just FYI. So let's get down below that. Additional research. Okay, so that was, I guess I already had this one. So this was a little bit more research. That was a survey given to Army Special Forces and Ranger training. Past present use of supplement with 85%, so even higher than those in the NSW. I'll just get past that. It's not really probably of real interest here. Let's see, research examples. So this was kind of the stuff that ended up in, and more, a whole bunch more, but this was the type of stuff that ended up in the paper I did with Dr. Hodebeck. And some of this was pretty dramatic. I mean, post-exercise protein supplementation resulted in fewer medical visits from infection, muscle joint problems, heat exhaustion. And I recall the number was not a small amount. There was a study done with Marine recruits, I recall, that were given a post-exercise protein supplement versus non, and the number of the reduction in going to the medical visit was quite large. Vitamin C reduced incidence of respiratory infections. Now, this melatonin, which is the big one, we're talking about circadian rhythms. Melatonin can be very helpful in resetting or improving the issue of circadian rhythm. So, again, melatonin is another hormone that has been around a long time, pretty well understood as far as the basics of why it existed. But again, in the last decade or so, there's been a tremendous learned about melatonin and its impact on health. And it does a lot more than was originally thought. Definitely something worth looking into. Another, magnesium reduction in blast-induced hearing loss. That was one of the most interesting things to me. Again, this wasn't done in mice. This wasn't done in monkeys or whatever. There was a human study done in military recruits, and found that those that were given just simple magnesium had much less hearing damage due to blast-induced hearing loss, which is, of course, is blast waves, IEDs, cannons, gunfire, yada, yada, yada. So this is some interesting stuff, but again, I'm not going to hold you guys on here too long. Another one, of course, here's more. I mean, caffeine's an obvious one. This was more somewhat performance oriented in health. So these talks that I was giving were not just targeted at reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. They were sort of a balanced talk also about, again, the military loves caffeine because it's simple, it's inexpensive, it's fairly non-toxic, and they put it in bars, they put it in drinks, and they find that it improved target engagement time, running performance, improved vigilance, and mood, and so forth. So pretty simple stuff. Vitamin E, zinc, L-tyrosine, sustained working memory under stress, selenium, protection against ionizing radiation. So this was just kind of the stuff I would go through, but I'm going to get back to, you guys specifically. And these were my summary conclusions. Supplement use is very common in special operations, according to data, and so on and so forth. So let's get back to supplement basics. Again, we'll talk supplements for a minute, but basically I tend to list supplements in the sort of which I'll show you my pyramid as let's just get to the pyramid so we don't have to wait too much time there about it. No. Okay, beta-alanine. Okay, so there is what I call the performance pyramid, supplement pyramid. On the bottom, you have your foundational stuff, good nutrition, healthy oils, beans, legumes, and so forth. In the middle, of course, fruits and vegetables. And some supplements, what I would say, were well documented, have good data, they're safe, they have clear benefits to health and performance. Going up the ladder, you're going to have, red meat, which has a lot of saturated fat, and butter and cheese and so forth. More starchy vegetables like potatoes. Of course, pasta's but pasta, rice, that type of thing, those aren't vegetables, but you know what I'm saying. And at the very top, sweets, alcohol, and fried garbage. That was my basic performance health pyramid. Let's get a little further. So yeah, this was talking about training mistakes, changes in combat paradigms. This again was really more military focused, but I want to really get back to. So this was basically how to correctly design programs for tactical and combat athletes. Again, these terms like combat athlete and tactical athlete. These are kind of all the rage. Like a lot of people have heard them and all, but I was doing this 20 years ago. About 20 years ago and stuff. So I've been kind of ahead of this for a long time. All right, I'm not even getting into this. No. Benefits. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna pull out of this, and we're gonna talk about some general guidelines, and then we're gonna get into that article in PoliceOne, and then we'll be done. But I just want to sort of hopefully give my plan for this. Let me get out of this. Stop sharing this screen. Let's get back to me here. All right, remove that. Okay, so what I'm basically going to try to do with this video is give a large overview. As you see, it's already running a little long. Give some resources and hopefully some motivation. Honestly, just motivate law enforcement, anybody that's watching this, to really start thinking about what are the real risk factors as to what's going to take you out. When I'm talking about things like, Kevlar, you might spend time at the range, you might spend time in the dojo, and all that, and the training and such forth to protect yourself, which of course is important. And the article, like I say, that Whit and I wrote is specific to that, which you'll find very useful. But if you're going to do all that, and you're not going to look at what the risk, the real risk is, what you're facing, then again, I would say you're probably missing the really important points here of what you need to do. So let's go down a little bit, and then we're going to go to this other article I want to look at, and then we'll be done. So basically, when I've done seminars for patrol officers, I stick to some pretty basic stuff. For example, what's the major excuse you get from patrol officers? At least that I hear. We're out on the road. We don't have an opportunity to eat well. We stop in so and so place and we eat quick, and so on and so forth. And what I would do, I should have got one, but I didn't. What I would do is, just to be a ball breaker, is I would pick up this cooler, about so big cooler, just basic igloo cooler. And I would hold it up and go, this magic box, people, is what will prevent you from doing that and having that excuse to just, go eat whatever. Okay. Before you leave your house, you put, healthy food in your cooler. You put a turkey sandwich, an apple, a yogurt, a diet drink or something, before you hit the road. And therefore you don't have to eat junk, and they would all roll their eyes and whatever. But you know what? Again, I did get feedback from, some of those seminars I did had, 200, 300 people in them. And I got feedback from them that said, yeah, well, you're right. I knew about it, but I started using the cooler. I started to bring my food with me, and you know what? I lost weight just doing that alone. Simple stuff, right? But again, simple is best. Sometimes you overcomplicate things. Things aren't good. Exercise. Look, people, I shouldn't have to tell you this. You all know this, but there is a pretty surprising number of patrol athletes that, or patrol, I shouldn't say patrol athletes yet, but patrol officers, who you are, that could stand to get some exercise and lose some weight. Different departments have different requirements. Some departments don't even have a requirement, but you all know, probably the biggest thing you could do for yourself is obviously control your weight and get some regular exercise. Yeah, I get it. I do know, again, the job is long and stressful, and you have, kids to deal with and all that. But this is sometimes where you guys got to get together and come up with a plan. Sometimes you can, if you have to, you put in your own a couple of bucks and put a little gym in the garage at the station. If you have to, you go and, start talking to the powers that be about maybe funding a little something, and so forth. I'm just saying, how this works. There's a will, there's a way. Get it done. Embrace the suck, whatever you got to do, and don't overthink it. But you got to get that exercise, and you really do. And again, I'm happy to go to my website, bringzone.com. There's tons of information there on that. Don't overthink it. If you go do whole body weight training 2 to 3 days a week, you get out and do a little road work couple days a week. That's better than nothing. That's enough. Remember, I like to say that, perfection is the enemy of good enough. Sometimes good enough is good enough. If that's what you can do, that's what you can do. So I'm not going to go on too long about that. Supplements. This is where I think, again, you really don't get good information. The powers that be, the medical establishment and such tend to be sort of anti-supplement, and I think that's a mistake. Again, I'm not going to go down the entire list of things. What I will do, again, is link maybe to some articles from places that I think have good information on supplements. But here's the thing. The term supplement is very descriptive. Supplements are supplemental to a good diet, right? You can't supplement your way out of a crappy diet, but to not recommend any supplements, again, especially for populations that are under additional stress and demands and so forth. Personally, I think it's irresponsible. And I'm a little different in that respect, but all I can say is I've been working with high-level athletes and pro bodybuilders and all that. And again, I just gave you some of the information where some of the fast movers use a lot of supplements. Now, maybe I'll use the right supplements. And again, unfortunately, they get a lot of their information from unvetted sources, and that's another talk for another day. But there's a number of supplements that are worth using, certainly, that may help reduce the risk of heart disease and other diseases, somewhere by dealing with deficiencies, sometimes by reducing inflammation. You have to understand that cardiovascular disease, an aspect of cardiovascular disease is chronic inflammation, and that's not really controversial. That's well established. The part that's a little more controversial is the chicken or the egg. That is, what is the cause and effect of that chronic inflammation? But there is no real debate that underlying cardiovascular disease and some cancers and diabetes, again, which officers also suffer more diabetes and so forth, is chronic inflammation. So again, I'd always recommend a good multivitamin. Fish oil, an aspirin a day seems to be, or at least a baby aspirin. Again, that gets debated up and down. I'm still a fan. I think the data still supports it. You might find some conflicting things. N-acetylcysteine is another one, raises glutathione. I would say you could also take some additional, depending on the multivitamin, but some additional antioxidants aren't going to do you any harm, and they're not terribly expensive and so forth. Maybe I can do an article or a second video on, I don't know, supplements sort of targeted to law enforcement. But they're going to be basically, as far as what is useful for addressing perhaps prevention of cardiovascular disease and that chronic inflammation, they're basically the same for all of us. But there's something worth looking into. Absolutely something you're going to want to look into and keep an eye on. And if you start to, address those things that we're talking about in steps and do it, slowly but surely, you'll definitely notice a difference. Okay. So let's look at this other article, PoliceOne. I think it's definitely worth something. I think it's worth your time. And then you guys can check out what I put. Let's see. I need to. No. Oh, I don't want that. Sorry. I want to remove that guy. I want to share a different screen. Let's see. Share screen. Oh, Chrome tab. Sorry. Okay. There we go. So the reason I thought this was a really good article on their part, and I think this we'll tie all this in specific to law enforcement. This was just published in PoliceOne, May 11, 2022. I actually had a section in PoliceOne many moons ago. I was reviewing products and doing videos and stuff for them. They also did a nice review of my after the courses and stuff that I did. I had a little guide. It's called what is it called? It's a little performance guide as far as for tactical law enforcement, as far as upping their training game and stuff. It's called Practical Applied Stress Training, PAST. Anyway, so let's get through this. Heart disease is the #1 killer of law enforcement. Here's how to protect yourself. This is a good article. I'll link it below, of course. But what I liked about it was, again, they are talking about some of the specific latest figures. So, example, what I was saying earlier is it says police officers are 25 times more likely to die of heart attack than to be killed by a violent action of a suspect. Said Noel March, Chief Strategy Officer of Sigma Tactical Wellness. We'll talk about Sigma Tactical in a little bit. I don't know these guys, so I have no connection to them. But it looks, at least from what I'm reading this article, it sounds like they're dialing in what police officers need to start getting on. So let's see. So statistics help shape the mission behind Sigma. So Sigma looks to be a specific company set up by a cardiologist who was also in law enforcement. So good on him. But so there's a story behind these guys. But what they do is they've developed a specific panel. It says the Sigma evaluation begins with an advanced lipid panel test and non-invasive imaging. Cardiopulmonary exercise stress test using stationary bike comes next. These are pretty straightforward. And again, whether you check Sigma or not, I would highly recommend that, even though you appear to be healthy, active, and whatever, as my friend Whit was, I would always recommend getting regular lipid, advanced blood work done, at least yearly. But a stress test is not a bad idea. Again, if you can cut this stuff off and get it early, you have a lot likelier not to die. So here's some really interesting data, and then we'll get off here, which I found interesting. So let's see. So what these guys did was they screened 6,500 cops in multiple states. And what they found is the incidence of what they call preclinical or before symptoms are present of heart disease, which would be, chest pain and so forth, which by that time you've either, you've got a blockage if you're experiencing angina, or by the time you experience a symptom, could be too late. But anyway, they found that before symptoms are present, heart disease was present in 50% of those officers. 50%. That is one hell of a number. Early blockages were detected in otherwise fit appearing men and women as early as age 30. Folks, that should hit home here, people. Now, another interesting data point that they had was published data shows that between age 55 and 60, the chances of a civilian, i.e. me, dying from a heart attack is 1.9%. In law enforcement community, it's 56%. So when I was talking about that law enforcement is a higher risk of dying from CVD, it's not a small bit. It's not 10%. It's not 20%. It's a shitload is what it is. If you don't want to science and talk numbers, let's just call it that. So I know you guys are on the job. If you've been on the job long enough, maybe not even long enough, officers that have passed away from heart disease and other diseases. But let's stick to heart disease before their time. And this is not by coincidence here. And as I said, what I do see here, and this will be I think my final point, is, as I said, what I don't really see in this article, but I think they hint at it, is that even when you account for the usual suspects of what causes heart disease, elevated lipids and blood pressure and so forth, law enforcement still has higher rates, and that is likely due to the stress. And you must also address stress management. That's a must. And however you decide to do it, meditation and Tai Chi, walking, something called mindful meditation. There's various ways. You have to find what works for you. But there's even a book. I'll link the book by a buddy of mine who was a Navy SEAL. Mark Devine I think he was CEO of SEAL Team 2. He's very, very big on yoga, on meditation, on movement patterns and stuff. He has a great book. I'll put that down. So again, some of you may be into it and are like, yeah, I get it. I'm open to it. And some of you may be like, meditation or whatever. That's so, or yoga or whatever. That's so hippy dippy. It's not. Okay. So, but regardless of how you do it, because drinking a 6-pack or 2 or 6 or whatever on Saturday, that's not stress management, folks. Stress management, again, lowers blood pressure, reduces stress levels, obviously improves mood. Now, of course, regular exercise helps a lot with that. But I also tend to, again, feel that you also really have to put aside some time specifically for that mental aspect of stress. Again, whether that's yoga, talking through a therapist, mindful meditation, you have to find what works for you. I'm happy to give advice. Feel free to leave comments below or reach out to me. And, if I can direct you to some books or videos or whatever, I'm happy to do it. So take a look at this article, which I will link below the video. There's a contact, for Sigma Tactical Wellness. It looks to me, from what I checked out, and again, I don't know these guys from anything, but from what I checked out, I think they're really on the right direction. And you are dealing with, prior law enforcement. So somebody who gets it, I totally understand. One of the barriers, of course, between law enforcement and military and anybody that's I would say law enforcement, military are the most difficult as far as the barrier between them and non, because it's just, it's a very different community. It's as a culture. And if you don't understand it and get that culture, it's hard to break the barrier and have, people. I understand, again, when I do these seminars, sometimes when I understand, they're looking at me, and saying, well, he's giving good advice, but he hasn't been there. He hasn't done the job and so forth. And I get that. And I think, again, some people are better than others. Again, I've been sort of in the community via my friends, via myself, via, projects, via writing for a long, long time. And I come from a long line of World War II military guys and so on and so forth. So I think that I probably get the culture and the lingo as best as somebody's going to is not, has not done the job. But I understand, I do get the resistance to from hearing from or getting advice from or lecturing or whatever from people that have not done the job, and maybe saying things that would come across as being easier said than done. I get that, but I also, again, uh, known a lot of officers who initiated some of the things that we're talking about, and saw really useful advice, and end of the day they want to be around, see their kids and their grandkids, and that should be your goal, and I get the stress and all that. So I hope this helps. I know I tried to cover a lot of ground here. Let me get out of this, and we'll get off, because I know it's been a long talk. All right. Anyway, I hope this was of value to you guys, and at least maybe hopefully by this video I gave a little something back to the community in for my old friend Whit there. And I'll see you guys on the brink soon.